There is a book sitting in a library near you that was written before the light bulb was common, before the automobile existed, before anyone had heard a voice come out of a box. It was written in 1888, and in it, the author described your life, in detail, with unsettling accuracy. And then he died at 48, largely forgotten, while the world he imagined quietly assembled itself around his grave. His name was Edward Bellamy. And this is the story of the most accurate prophet in American history that almost nobody remembers. The year is 1888. America is in the middle of what historians call the Gilded Age. Coal, steel, child labor, 12-hour working days, robber barons controlling entire industries, streets full of horse-drawn carts and gas lamps. Into this world, Bellamy, a journalist from Massachusetts, son of a Baptist minister, publishes a novel. It tells the story of a young man named Julian West who falls into a hypnotic sleep in 1887 and wakes up in the year 2000. He finds Boston transformed. He finds a world that looks, in many ways, like ours. The book became an instant sensation. It sold over 1 million copies. It was translated into more than 20 languages. It became the third best-selling novel of the entire 19th century in the United States, behind only Uncle Tom's Cabin and Ben-Hur. Over 160 political clubs formed across America just to debate its ideas. John Dewey, one of the most influential thinkers in American history, said it was one of the most important books ever written in the United States. And then the 20th century arrived, did its worst, and Bellamy's name faded. But the things he described did not. Let's begin with the one that makes people stop and stare. In the year 2000 of Bellamy's novel, people do not carry cash. Instead, every citizen receives an annual credit allocation from the government, a share of the national product, and accesses it using a small card. He describes this card being used in shops, for goods, for services. He called it a credit card. Not once, not twice, 11 times. The phrase credit card, those exact words, appeared in a novel written in 1888. The first real credit card, issued by Diners Club, arrived in 1950. 62 years later, Bellamy didn't stumble upon a phrase. He built an entire system around it. His fictional card was less like debt and more like a debit card connected to a public account, which, if anything, anticipates contactless payments and digital wallets more precisely than the Diners Club card did. He wrote this while people were still paying for bread with coins they carried in leather pouches. In Julian West's year 2000, you can summon music directly into your home. There are central music stations. Bellamy describes them almost like broadcast studios, and citizens can select what they want to hear and have it transmitted through telephone lines directly into their living rooms at any hour of the day. A reviewer in 1888 called this charming fantasy. Today we call it Spotify, or Apple Music, or the radio, which itself arrived 30 years after Bellamy described the concept. But it goes further. Bellamy describes multiple channels running simultaneously, so you could choose between different performances. You could switch between them. That's a playlist. Written in the year of the horse-drawn carriage. He also described sermons and lectures being transmitted the same way, into homes, on demand. That's the podcast. Shopping in Bellamy's future Boston does not happen in small street front stores. Instead, people visit vast showrooms, enormous spaces filled with every category of goods imaginable, where you browse, select what you want, and the purchase is then delivered directly to your home from a central warehouse. He even described the showrooms having lounges, places to sit, to rest while you shop. That is IKEA. That is Amazon. That is the entire architecture of modern retail, described in 1888, when the corner shop was the only model anyone knew. The delivery mechanism in his novel, it should be said, was pneumatic tubes. He got the concept exactly right and the technology completely wrong, which, if you have ever waited 3 days for a parcel, feels oddly relatable. Bellamy described something he called the telephone newspaper, a system by which information, news, and work could be transmitted remotely, removing the need to be physically present in a central location. Scholars have since identified this as a direct conceptual ancestor of telecommuting, working from home, and digital collaboration. He wrote this in the same decade that most workers had to physically walk to a factory or office, often before sunrise, and stay until after dark. Here is the one that might be most striking of all. In Bellamy's year 2000, gender equality is not a debate. It is not a movement. It is not a struggle. It is simply the condition of the world, unremarkable, assumed, the way gravity is assumed. Women work. Women are educated. Women hold positions of authority. The novel does not celebrate this. It does not argue for it. It simply describes it as the obvious way of things, the way you might describe the fact that people eat food. He wrote this in 1888. American women would not get the right to vote for another 32 years. He didn't just predict the outcome. He predicted the tone. That one day the equality of women would seem so obvious that no one would think to comment on it. It would be dishonest not to mention this. Bellamy imagined that all of these advances would arrive together, as a package, delivered by a peaceful, rational, socialist state that had nationalized every industry and abolished poverty without violence or conflict. A world where crime had essentially disappeared because inequality had disappeared with it. That part did not happen. The technologies arrived. The social transformation did not. We got Spotify and the credit card and Amazon delivery, and kept the inequality that Bellamy thought those things would dissolve. His novel is, in the end, a document of magnificent partial accuracy. He saw the instruments of the future with astonishing clarity. He misjudged what people would do with them. Edward Bellamy died in 1898. He was 48 years old. Tuberculosis. He had spent the last years of his life running a newspaper, promoting the political clubs his novel had inspired, watching the ideas begin to take hold. And then he was gone. The clubs dissolved. The movement faded. The novel fell out of print, then back into it, then out again. But the world kept building what he described. Credit cards arrived. Music came into homes. Vast warehouses replaced corner shops. People began working without ever leaving their houses. Women took their place in public life as though it had always been obvious. Bellamy wrote none of this as prophecy. He wrote it as criticism, as a way of asking why the world of 1888 couldn't simply be better. He was imagining what he thought was obviously possible and asking why no one was doing it. He didn't predict the future. He just refused to believe the present was the best anyone could do.